Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to my channel Internal Audit Lab by Noshin. Today I will discuss another important topic of CI Part 1, which is Quality Assurance and Improvement Program. Basically, I will discuss the key elements of QAIP today, which will be tested in the exam in basic aspect. So let's begin the video. Quality Assurance and Improvement Program is described in Attribute Standard 1300, where it is said that the Chief Audit Executive must develop and maintain a quality assurance and improvement program that covers all aspects of internal audit activity. So this QAIP should encompass all aspects of operating and managing the internal audit activity, including consulting engagement as found in the mandatory elements of the IPPF. The purpose of QIP. Its purpose is to evaluate the internal audit activities' conformance with the standards and whether internal auditors apply the code of ethics. It assesses the efficiency and effectiveness of the internal audit activity and also identifies opportunities for improvement. To do QAIP, the CAE must have a thorough understanding of the mandatory elements of the IPPF, especially the standards and code of ethics. The CA periodically evaluates QIP and update it as needed. For example, as the internal audit activity matures or as conditions within the internal audit activity change, adjustment to the QIP may become necessary to ensure that it continues to operate in an effective and efficient manner and to assure stakeholders that it adds value by improving the organization's operations. Now, the components of QAIP. There are 5 components of QAIP, which are internal assessment, external assessment, communication of QAIP result, proper use of a conformance statement, and disclosure of non-conformance. Now, this internal and external assessment can be categorized further. There are 2 types of internal assessment, which are ongoing monitoring and periodic self-assessment. And external assessment also 2 types, which are a full external assessment and a self-assessment with independent external validation. Now, the first type of internal assessment, this is ongoing monitoring. Ongoing monitoring is an integral part of the day-to-day supervision, review, and measurement of the internal audit activity, which is incorporated into the routine policy and practices used to manage the internal audit activity and uses processes, tools, and information considered necessary to evaluate conformance with the code of ethics and the standards. So this ongoing monitoring is a routine evaluation of the practices and policies of performing individual audits. The type and amount of this assessment will vary depending on the nature of the organization. This ongoing monitoring may be achieved through different types of activities like pre-approval of the audit scope, adequate supervision of the auditor's work, work paper procedure and sign-off, selective peer review of the work paper or review of the report or supporting documentation, establishing and maintaining the KPI, and etc. etc. Now, the second type of internal assessment, which is periodic assessment. Periodic assessments are conducted to evaluate conformance with the code of ethics and the standards, and it is a scheduled approach to determine if the right activities are being performed, should changes be made to the internal audit practices and procedures in order to enhance the quality of the program. This periodic self-assessment focuses on assessing the adequacy and effectiveness of the ongoing monitoring activities, whether the value added by the internal audit activity, the adequacy and appropriateness of the internal audit charter, plans, policies, and procedures, the quality of the work performed, or the effectiveness of the internal audit activity meeting stakeholder expectation, and so on. This periodic assessment can be conducted by the member of the internal audit activity who have extensive experience with the IPPF, or it can be done by the certified internal auditors or other competent audit professionals who are currently assigned elsewhere in the organization. There are some important points to remember. The Chief Audit Executive will determine the frequency of the periodic self-assessment as per the discussion with the board. And if the internal audit department is large enough, then the department may conduct periodic self-assessment on annual basis. But if it is a small or a less mature, then it may perform this assessment less frequently. If the external assessment takes the form of a self-assessment with independent validation, that is the second type of external assessment. So the periodic internal assessment can serve in that case as the self-assessment portion of this process. A periodic self-assessment performed within a short time before an external assessment can serve to facilitate and reduce the cost of external assessment. And those conducting the ongoing monitoring and periodic self-assessment communicate the result directly to the CAE while performing the assessment. So what are the basic difference between ongoing monitoring and periodic assessment? Ongoing monitoring actually focus on the review conducted at the engagement level, and it also focuses on conformance with the performance standard at the engagement level. But periodic assessment actually provide a more holistic review of the internal literature activity, and it addresses actually conformance with every standard. Now come to the point, external assessment. This external assessment must be conducted at least once every 5 years by a qualified independent assessor or assessment team from outside the organization. In case of external assessment, CA needs to discuss two things with the board. One is the form and frequency of the external assessment, and another is the qualification and independence of the external assessor or assessment team, including any potential conflict of interest. So also external assessment need to be performed once every 5 years, but it may be considered more frequently if there is a change in the organization leadership or change in the internal audit policies and procedures, or there is a significant change in the structure of the organization. Now, the first form of external assessment is a full external assessment, which is conducted by a qualified independent external assessor or assessment team. The major elements of full external assessment are conformance with the standards and the code of ethics, the extent to which the internal audit activity meets expectation of the stakeholders and add value to the organization's operation, and the efficiency and effectiveness of the internal audit activity. The second type of external assessment, which is self-assessment with independent validation, which is usually conducted by the internal audit activity and then validated by a qualified independent external assessor. The scope of these self-assessment internal validation are a team under the direction of CA will perform and fully document a comprehensive self-assessment process. There should be a qualified independent reviewer or review team perform sufficient on-site test of the self-assessment to validate the result and express the indicated level of the activity's conformance. But there will be a limited attention to other areas such as operational improvement, benchmarking, and interview with the senior and operating management. Now, as I mentioned that the qualification of the external assessor assessment team is very important here. So assessor assessment team must demonstrate competence in two main areas. One is in-depth knowledge of IPPS and another is external quality assessment process. And other preferred attributes are like this team should or external assessor or team should have a sufficient educational background, technical and business experience, with at least one member possessing adequate knowledge of the organization industry, etc. And another important feature of this assessor assessment team is they should be independent. They must not have actual, apparent, or potential conflict of interest. If the potential assessor were previous employee of the company, then consideration should be given how long those potential assessors were independent from the company. And peer reciprocal assessment is also possible, but it should be within the three independent companies. That is, if the CA of company 1 may conduct the assessment of the company 2, the CA of company 2 may conduct assessment of company 3, and the CA of company 3 can assess the company 1. But CA of two companies performing the reciprocal external assessment are not considered independent. Now, in a nutshell, what are the difference between internal and external assessment? The type of assessment: ongoing monitoring and periodic assessment in case of internal assessment, and external assessment, that is full external assessment and self-assessment with independent validation. What are the form of report? At least annually result of the internal assessment, necessary action plan, and their successful implementation are reported to senior management, the board. In case of external assessment, preliminary result discussed with the chief audit executive, final report sent to senior management board, and chief audit executive must provide plan to address deficiencies. Now, who perform? In case of internal assessment, member of the internal audit activity and supervised by the CAEs. In case of external assessment, performed by qualified and independent professionals or reviewers from outside the organization. Now, how often it is performed? In case of internal assessment, if the assessment is ongoing monitoring, it is performed throughout the year. If it is periodic assessment, then it is performed as needed. And external assessment, at least once every 5 years. So that's all about from today's part. So another video will be released on QAIP for discussing the rest of the issues. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.